Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. Joining me today, we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, this is the one I've been waiting for all month long here.
All month long. We were talking today all about Monsters, Inc.
hmm
Um, to wrap up our Pixar month here in April, as kind of the culmination of our Pixar old and new little focus. A little bit of housekeeping before we dive into kind of the meat of the show. I wanted to kind of announce the upcoming episodes that we're planning on doing. Next week, we will be kind of wrapping up Moon Knight as that season will be ending. So we'll kind of have kind of our season one wrap up episode of that. No idea who's going to join me for that one. Might just be me, or I might throw some kind of call out to the internet because I know
Oh
you
yeah,
have not been watching that at all, Logan.
can't even
Um,
pretend like I'm interested in it.
yeah.
Okay.
The following week, originally I had these kind of reversed, but I was like, Moon Knight's going to be like the hot conversation point next week. The following week will either be a Star Wars May the 4th be with us kind of thing if they release any like special May the 4th item, or I'm thinking I might just do like the two-parter Rebels premiere,
Hmm.
and kind of take a look at that series. So it'll be something Star Wars themed. I'll have more details next week once we know what, if anything, gets released on May the 4th.
hmm
Following that, we'll have a couple episodes that will probably get delayed a day or two just because of the timing. But we're going to do on May 20th, the Chippendale Rescue Rangers
hmm
movie comes out to Disney Plus, and that would be a Friday. So we'll either push that to like a Saturday or Sunday episode, but that will be the topic for that week. And then end of May, we will be doing the Obi-Wan Kenobi first episode, which also has been pushed to that Friday. So that might come out Saturday or Sunday. We'll
hmm
figure out schedules, whenever I can get people on, basically.
hmm
But yeah, so that is kind of the upcoming slate. Moon Knight, something Star Wars related, Chippendale, and then another Star Wars thing. So stay tuned for that. Also, if you like the show, of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. So diving into Monsters Inc. Before we dive in, I guess I'll kind of pull this kind of topic element of the show from what we've been doing on that Bond show. What is your history with Monsters Inc. there, Logan?
That's a good question. No, my history with Monsters Inc. is it is probably one of the Pixar movies I have the earliest really solid memories of. Right, like I have memories of Toy Story, like the original one, for like as long as I've memories. The movie came out when I would have been 3 in '95, right? So like I'm sure I saw it pretty much as it was coming out because of my older brother. Um, and then like I really remember Toy Story 2, seeing that in like a movie theater. A Bug's Life, I have like vague memories of, but like Monsters Inc. is like the first one after like the turn of the century that like I remember like sitting in the movie theater watching it and then going home afterwards like a couple months later and like renting it again and again and again on like the little VHS tapes. Like it's one of the ones along with like Finding Nemo and like The Incredibles that forms like a trilogy of films right after like the turn of the century that like hit perfectly for me being in like elementary to middle school and like really getting into Pixar.
Nice. Yeah, I would have been in high school when this one came out. And definitely like as a Disney kid growing up was watching all of these in the theaters and stuff like that. And this one certainly, like, this one was probably a fun one just with the family
Mm,
because like my dad in particular loves, John Goodman and Billy Crystal. And so like so I guess similar to, Tom Hanks and Tim Allen from Toy Story, like it was just great casting for like their generation, and then also just great stuff for like my generation, my sister, of course, as well. So like while I was certainly older, I basically was locked in to Pixar kind of throughout their era, either seeing the movies like as they were coming out, with very few exceptions was I not seeing like a Pixar movie in theaters. So this one definitely got like attention. And it was also obviously like it coming out, History Lesson originally released November 2nd, 2001. The world kind of needed lighthearted movies around that time.
Right.
So yeah, this being, a couple months after the tragedy and trauma of 9/11, and that like first real earth shattering, everybody's just watching the news for, every day 24 hours a day kind of thing. This little bit of lightheartedness certainly, I think, probably helped shake my family out of, getting back into some sense of like normalcy, or let's just go to a movie and enjoy that as a family, kind of thing. Other releases of the time, we had Serendipity came out October 5th, and I just wanted to shout that out because that is like just one of those movies I really enjoyed. One of those little rom-coms of that era. Shouting this out because, of course, Logan being such a diehard fan of the Halloween Town series, Halloween Town 2, Calabar's Revenge came out October 12th. There's a whole D Plus show episode dedicated to that if you want to go check that out.
Not the worst Halloween Town movie
from last year. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to that later
Stay
this
excited. Year. Halloween Town 3 might be better.
Maybe.
4 is where it gets really off the rails.
We had Donnie Darko came out October 26th. Amelie came out November 2nd. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone came out November 16th. Ocean's 11, December 7th. Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring came out
was a hell of a
December 19th. Yeah, it was a hell of a kind of end of the year. And the Best Picture winner that year, Beautiful Mind, came out December 21st. Not really included in this section, but and I could throw probably into trivia too. This was, as we alluded to last week, one of the first movies that was nominated for the Best Animated Film Oscar. It lost to Shrek, which had come out in
totally fair
April of earlier that year. Yeah, I get it. I like looking back, I wish this one had won.
I don't.
But I think yeah, like Shrek has this weird like cultural touchstone place. And as one of those like first ones that was like subverting all of the Disney tropes, it's almost I guess it is more fitting that it ends up winning the first Best Animated Picture that would have otherwise been dominated by Disney over the years.
I think Shrek is so interesting. Like I feel like your age group was kind of stuck in the middle, right? Like I feel like people who were in like their like 30s, right, who were parents when Shrek came out, really like Shrek because it was such a different kind of animated film and was like doing so many like subversions and deconstruction of a lot of like kind of classic Disney animated film tropes. And people who were younger, like me, really liked Shrek because it was just unlike any other animated movie we had seen. And I feel like your kind of age group was just kind of like, all right, yeah, like it didn't kind of hit either one of those sweet spots of like appealing to like younger kids who hadn't seen anything like that, or appealing to adults who were getting like the adult humor element of it.
Yeah, I think like I think I got and appreciated a lot of the adult humor of it. I think it is that because again I would have been 16 at this time, and so a lot of the like there are a lot of fart jokes and poop and just like that kind of humor in Shrek that is just like that's not necessarily like Academy Award material kind of thing for me. Those are the issues that I have with Shrek. I love the subversion stuff, and Shrek the musical continues that and does like has like a lot of fun riffs on musical theater in general.
Uh-huh.
So like it's one of my favorite musicals out there, because of a lot of that, and because they kind of continue the like let's deconstruct this aspect of things. I just don't like the like all of the fart and burp and like all of that like very like rudimentary humor. It just doesn't, that element of it doesn't appeal to me.
I think for me, I look at Shrek, and I'm stealing this from, I think it was Nick Scarpino from the Batman interview series he did for Lego Batman, where he said, they're going to throw 100 jokes at you, and 60 to 70% of them are going to work for you, and 30 or 40% won't, but they're going so quick, and they're throwing a new joke at you so fast that even the ones that don't work never really stop things for you. And I think that's totally true for Shrek. I, again, have long been of the opinion that Shrek 2 is actually the better, like, constructed movie, and is, like, more even killed. But Shrek 1, obviously, is such an important film. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Anyway, this isn't Shrek, that Shrek
One
Plus
day,
show or anything like that.
We could do an entire month of just Shrek movies.
We could, yeah. And there's still, spin-offs and like Puss in Boots stuff is still coming out. So all these years later. But back to Monsters Inc. It has a runtime of 1 hour and 32 minutes. In the Pixar timeline of things, we had A Bug's Life. Last week's episode had come out November 28th, 1998, and we had a year later Toy Story 2 came out November 24th, 99. Then there was a couple year gap between Toy Story 2 and Monsters Inc. here in 2001. And then then another couple year gap to get to Finding Nemo in May 30th of 2003, and then largely they've been on like a 1 or 2 a year kind of thing since then. So you had like The Incredibles November of 2004 following that up. The roll call here, we had a 3-person directing team on this one. You had Pete Docter. This was his first feature film. He'd
the
also
best Pixar director for what it's worth.
Yeah,
everyone of home
I
runs.
won't necessarily disagree with that based on what we have here. We have this was his first feature. He'd done a couple of the shorts prior to this. After Monsters Inc., he would return to the directing chair for Up, Inside Out, and Soul, which are all phenomenal films.
Yes.
David Silverman was a co-director here. Oddly enough, less on the Pixar side of things. He has done a lot of Simpsons stuff over the years, including the Simpsons movie. And then he has worked on most, if not all, of the Simpsons shorts that you can find on Disney Plus, including most recently When Billy Met Lisa. And I want to give a shout out to Eva Enriquez, Ben Bellevue's partner, who works on the like Simpsons animation team and is credited in When Billy Met Lisa, that you can find on Disney Plus now. And that's Billie Eilish meeting Lisa. So you can go find that short that David Silverman directed and one of our friends worked on. Then the last of this trio of directors, Lee Unkrich, as a co-director as well. He prior to this had co-directed Toy Story 2 and would go on to work on Finding Nemo, Toy Story 3, and most recently Coco. The writers for this one, we have 4 original story by and 2 screenplays, maybe 3. Pete Docter might have also done a screenplay on this. I don't. Oh, nope. So Pete Docter, as we mentioned there, on the directing side, also worked on the original story of this one, as well as Toy Story and Toy Story 2 prior to this. Then he would also do stories in addition to Up, Inside Out, and Soul that he directed. He also worked on the story for WALL-E. Jill Colton worked on the original story as well. This was her debut. She would also go on to work on or write the stories for Open Season and Abominable.
What a deep cut.
Abominable. I was like, Open Season. I was like, that's one of those ones that like I think was probably a DreamWorks or something like that. That it was like, I definitely did not see that one.
Open Season and Over the Hedge are the very 2007 era. Like, oh right, yeah, I saw that one time.
Yeah, like I put those in the same bucket as like Madagascar and all of the Madagascar spin-offs or whatever. Jeff Pigeon, also on the original story for this, largely worked on the shorts side of things, including one of the Monsters Inc. shorts called Mike's New Car, as well as a few others. And Ralph Eggleston worked on the original story for this, as well as the story of For the Birds, which was the Pixar short that basically coincided with, or that aired alongside Monsters Inc. in theaters. And then on the screenplay, Andrew Stanton, who we talked about last week, having written things like Mighty Mouse, The New Adventures, Toy Story 2, and then would go on to do Finding Nemo, WALL-E, Toy Story 3, John Carter, Finding Dory, and one of the upcoming episodes of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. And then Daniel Gerson also wrote on the screenplay of this, and would go on to also write for the screenplay of Monsters University, as well as Big Hero 6. Starring, we have John Goodman as Sullivan, of course, known from many, many TV things like Roseanne, The West Wing, Treme, Community, currently The Righteous Gemstones, and The Connors. And then on the film side of things, you have stuff like The Flintstones. I wanted to give a shout out here. He was in a TV movie version of A Streetcar Named Desire, playing the same character I played when I was in that show, Mitch, which is basically like Blanche's paramour in the film. Of course, he was in The Big Lebowski, Blues Brothers 2000, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And on the Disney side of things, he was also in The Princess and the Frog, among a million other things. Yes.
A million other things. John Goodman also would be remiss to give a shout out. A Missouri boy who graduated from my alma mater of Missouri State University as well.
There you go.
So,
we have, of course, Billy Crystal here, also as Mike, notorious stand-up comedian, Oscars host for many, many, many years, working on films as well, like When Harry Met Sally, City Slickers, Analyze This, and I'd written there the Emmys, but yeah, Oscars host extraordinaire. So yeah, Billy Crystal out there, just being Billy Crystal.
yeah,
Mary Gibbs as the voice of Boo, who has basically been like recycled as Boo in many other Monsters Inc. things like games and spin-off things and stuff like that. She was also listed as additional voices in Inside Out, so I don't know if that's like they recycled a child voice of her, or if they like brought her back in to do new voice work in Inside Out. And then this caught my attention because it's like her only other credit, but she is also currently in the Heroes of Extinction podcast series, which just is a point that I apparently need to create IMDb pages for all of us for our various podcast series, because they are in video form. But yes,
true.
Mary Gibbs there, iconically as the voice of Boo. Steve Buscemi playing Randall from films like Reservoir Dogs, Fargo, the TV series Boardwalk Empire, whole bunch of Adam Sandler stuff, and just lots of other stuff in general. Some of them very memeified. How do you do, fellow kids? There you go, Sopranos. We have James Coburn as Waternoose. Classic cowboy Western era actor from stuff like The Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape. He was also in the Muppet movie. I will always think of and remember him from the 90s film Maverick with Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
And James Garner.
That's a great movie. We should do a podcast on that. That's a phenomenal movie.
And one of his last credits following this would go on to be the film Snow Dogs.
Cuban Gooding Jr.
Yep. Jennifer Tilly here as Celia, from films like Liar Liar, the Bride of Chucky / Chucky series. She's also in The Haunted Mansion, which we've done a That D Plus show on. She was Madame Leota in that. And then she's been the voice of Bonnie in Family Guy for many, many years as well. And I think when we've talked about her on this before as well, World Series of Poker, like champion and winner and stuff like that. Just phenomenal little poker player there. And then lastly, I pulled in here Bob Peterson as Roz, was also the voice of Jerry in Jerry's Game, which we talked a little bit about last week. He would go on to do various, voices in additional films like Finding Nemo, Incredibles, and Cars. And he is probably one of his other best-known roles. He is the voice of both Doug and Alpha in Up. So shout out to Bob Peterson, because one of the little trivia bits there, I'll just jump ahead to that, is Bob Peterson, movie story supervisor, provided a temp voice of Roz, the Green Secretary, during production. The nasal sing-song voice proved to be such a success that they kept it in the final film. And just always fun when it's like, hey, we're just gonna do a placeholder filler kind of thing, and then everybody's like, actually, we'd just like that better than anything else anybody brought to the table. Some other trivia here. We have our Pixar staples, many of which are starting to be established by this point in time, including the Luxo Junior Ball, which is on the floor when Sully goes through Boo's door for the first time. A113 is referenced in here. It is listed on the walls where the doors go to, but it is simply A13. So it's one of the rare instances where like A113 isn't directly called out in the film. The Pizza Planet truck is seen when Randall is last seen in the trailer home from A Bug's Life next to the Pizza Planet truck from Toy Story. The man inside this was just other trivia associated with this IMDb fact, but the man inside the trailer is the same model as the simulated boy from the first scene, and the mom is the same boy but with a bun placed on his head. So they took very like simplistic 2D kind of little almost shadow puppets for that scene. We of course have John Ratzenberger in here as the Abominable Snowman,
one of his best cameos,
offering his snow cones. And then this was one of the earlier instances of a tease of the next film. Next up would be Finding Nemo, and first we have at the Harryhausen's restaurant behind the Octopus Chef there is a painting of Nemo on the wall, and then later when Sully throws Randall into a bedroom, you can see basically a statue of Nemo on the wall, like in the door, and. Last but not least, when Boo hands Sully some of her toys, she hands him a little Nemo toy. Additional trivia. Mary Gibbs was so young that it proved quite difficult to get her to stand in the recording studio and act her lines, so instead they simply followed her around with a microphone and cut Boo's lines together from the things she said while she played, which definitely, I think, leads to a lot of just the joy of her performance.
She was 5 when this movie came out. I just checked on my end.
Yeah. Normally took 11 to 12 hours to render a single frame of Sully because of his 2.3 million individually animated hair strands. Total number of hairs, 2,320,413. Just Pixar showing off in those days, the things they could do. Billy Crystal was originally offered the role of Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story, and he declined, which he later regretted after seeing the film itself, as it would have been a great opportunity for him. They would later promise Crystal a future role in a Pixar film that would tailor to his talents. Crystal told them to do what's best for your movie and don't forget me when something good comes around. Later in the late 90s, early 2000s, Crystal's wife received a phone call from John Lasseter, who told him Mr. Lasseter who told Billy Mr. Lasseter would like to speak with you, allowing him to voice Mike in Monsters, Inc. When Sully greets Ted, the monster's so big we only see the lower half of his body. Ted was originally supposed to be to roar like Godzilla. Filmmakers asked for permission from Toho, Godzilla's film studio, to use a Godzilla roar, but Toho turned them down. So instead, Ted responds with a chicken cluck. In one of the credit bloopers, he is also revealed to be a dinosaur, he's specifically Rex from Toy Story, auditioning for a role in the movie. I already mentioned the Bob Peterson temp line thing. The restaurant that Mike and Celia are at is called Harryhausen's. This is a homage to Ray Harryhausen, the man who made the stop-motion animation monsters for films like Jason and the Argonauts. Also, the octopus behind the bar in the restaurant only has 6 legs and is a reference to It Came From Beneath the Seas, a film in which Harryhausen created an octopus with 6 arms due to budget restrictions. And then lastly, yes, this was nominated for the inaugural Best Animated Feature Film, but lost to Shrek. But it is an Oscar winner because the song that plays at the end credits won the Best Original Song Oscar for that year. So I think like Toy Story got like a special honorary Oscar, but other than that, this is like the first Pixar film that wins an Oscar.
Academy Award.
Some of the shorts had won prior to that in the short form categories, but yes, this was the first full-length Pixar film that won an Oscar that was not like a special, hey, you guys did great work, but we don't have a place for you category.
Right.
So yeah. So yes, how does Monsters, Inc. hold up? What did you think returning to this and watching it? And how long has it been probably since you sat down and watched this one, do you think, Logan?
A year.
Oh, okay.
This is one of the movies that me and Travis watched. Right. We did a rewatch. I mean, I think Monsters, Inc. is great, right? Like, I think it is easily one of my favorite Pixar movies, right? We talked a lot last week about kind of that golden age of Pixar from Toy Story to Toy Story 3, really. And this to me is kind of emblematic of like the second, I guess, half of that golden age, right? Of like movies from Monsters, Inc. You get Incredibles, you get Finding Nemo, you get Cars, Wall-E, Up, that kind of all lead up into Toy Story 3. I think it's so much fun. In some ways, it is sort of a really underappreciated movie because at this point in time in Pixar's history, they really had only shown that Toy Story can be interesting, right? Like A Bug's Life, I think, was a bit more of a dud, I think is a really negative connotation to it, but a bit more of like, that's a fine movie.
It definitely didn't reach the heights of Toy Story.
Right, exactly. Where it blew everyone away. And I think Monsters, Inc. proved that they weren't just a one-trick pony, right? They could do other franchises and do other stories and do them just as well as Toy Story, right? And then they'd obviously rattle off Finding Nemo and Incredibles after just to really prove that point. I think it's one of the Pixar movies that most is just out to have a hell of a lot of fun, right? Like, it is probably one of the most pure comedies of any Pixar movie, I think, right? Like, even something like The Incredibles, which is very much focused on being more like a family drama almost than a comedy at times. Even Toy Story 2 obviously focuses on like way more serious, heavy topics. This one really doesn't. This one just plays like a comedy that has the Boo storyline. But that's really only there at the very end where it gets kind of like, oh, that's a serious, really beautiful moment. But for the most part, it is very slapsticky. Billy Crystal is a perfect fit in this film. It is exactly kind of his wheelhouse. Same for Steve Buscemi as Randall. Like, they play for each other so well. They're just playing it up. They're larger than life. To use that Bond show reference, they know exactly what kind of movie they are in, and they're having a blast in it. And yeah, like, I think this movie, a little bit like Luca, maybe, how we complimented that movie for not being about the end of the world or not having giant, crazy big stakes and just kind of allowing itself to just like be kind of a fun, breezy movie. That is what I think of when I think of Monsters, Inc., right? Like, I could watch Monsters, Inc. any day of the week in any mood and be happy. And that's not necessarily true for other movies like a Toy Story 3 or Wall-E that are a bit more of like an emotional roller coaster, right? Or Up. And Monsters, Inc. is like such a good like palate cleanse anytime you're just gonna leave smiling.
Yeah, it's interesting because like on this rewatch, and I probably watched it a year or so ago myself. Because I like when I was pulling it up, it was like 8 minutes left. I'm like, why is that like okay? Why did I only have 8 minutes left on this? And I'm realizing, oh, I probably rewatched it when Kind of Funny did their Pixar in Review series last year or 2 years ago, something like that. So it was like it was fresh enough in my Disney Plus queue that it was like, hey, you've been watching this recently. Do you want to just pick up here, or do you want to restart? And I was like, oh, I mean, definitely restart. But in this most recent rewatch, I was like, oh, there are not like end of the world necessarily stakes, but there are like stakes to the fact that like scaring just isn't doing the work and isn't producing the energy that like they need it to, and there's like this like looming threat of like a power outage, but it's very downplayed in favor of the like very personal story between Sully and Boo. And I think I mean you highlighted Steve Buscemi and Billy Crystal. I honestly think that so much of this movie works because of the heart that Sully puts into his relationship with Boo there. And it's just John Goodman just, knocking that out of the park.
John Goodman.
One of the other trivia elements that's out there that I didn't bother pulling in, and it's well-trod territory, is that unlike the normal kind of like animated recording techniques of everybody recording kind of their own individual stuff, John Goodman and Billy Crystal recorded a lot of their stuff together, and I think you sense that, and you hear kind of them riffing off one another, and Billy Crystal ad-libbing things and John Goodman reacting to that. I think you get a lot of that interplay in this that otherwise might have fallen a little bit more flat. There are elements of Billy Crystal's performance that feel almost Robin Williams as the genie. Of just like they gave him like a line and then he did like 30 variations of it with Billy Crystal, shtick, and they were like, all right, yeah, we're gonna go with that one. That's our favorite of this, and we're gonna animate to that. And again, I think that like I don't think that would work with everybody, but it works for this film, and it works with Billy Crystal, and it works with like Billy Crystal as Mike Wazowski. I think it is. I think that is a perfect note for that character to have, and especially where Mike ends up as kind of the stand-up comic who is also just going to largely be slapstick, but he's going to try and do things with like his tight five first, and then just fall on his face or poke his eye or whatever. But yeah, I think like of course the two-hander there, and I mean like it's even epitomized in that like in the song at the end, which again I think it ended up winning in part because they went and performed it there at the Oscars, and you just have John Goodman and Billy Crystal just crooning and singing a little bit of light jazz with one another, doing some Randy Newman. And yeah, it's a fun movie. I love just how like nonsensical and Boo is, and I think just like they pick such great sets of lines and just randomness from her to pull in, and it just like it gives her character such life. Even though we have no idea what she's really saying or we get enough from that, especially like especially if you go back and watch like those the first Toy Story, like all those like human characters very rough in the animation, but Boo here they at least like play into her design, and she like ends up coming alive for what she's doing. So there's a ton of fun there. And then I just also like a lot of the like world building that they do in the background, whether it is the walk to work and just the different glimpses of all the different monsters and stuff that you see. Like I love the of course the Ted that clucks like a chicken is a great gag, but like even the slug that like goes over the grate and then just like all of the slime goes through and it's just like eyes and a hat left. That's a great bit. All the kids playing with like doing jump rope using one of the monster's tongues is a fun little bit, and then that kind of has a little Rube Goldberg and like interacts with everybody in that scene kind of bit. So yeah, just like such fun creative design throughout this. I also love the runner of I forget his name now, but the monster who gets the sock on him, and the repeated 2319 calls by his partner, who's constantly like, oh yeah, we're in this through thick and thin, we're in this together, oh 2319, and then like just like all harm befalls the other guy.
George is his name. I
There
just
you go.
checked.
Thank you. So yeah, just like there's never a dull moment in here, and everything is just like so delightful. It's not. I think there are some moments that, while not dull, like I don't know that I necessarily needed a subplot between Mike and Celia and like their romance, struggling or anything like that. But like it's still fun, as just I guess seeing like a Cyclops with a Medusa headed lady kind of thing. And there are fun gags in there, including like the she mentions wanting to cut her hair and all the snakes freak out about it and don't want that and stuff like that.
Get in that cone around her head.
Yeah.
What's crazy, I'm glad you kind of touched on it too, at least somewhat, is that what's crazy about Monsters Inc. is for a movie with monsters in the title and that is all about monsters, how relatable and like human its story essentially is at the end of the day, right? Like this is essentially is like a workplace comedy, and it does it so well that within the first 5 or 10 minutes you kind of forget that you're watching these like crazy monsters doing these things, because like Mike and Sully would fit in so many modern day or like classic sitcoms from like the 70s, 80s, 90s kind of thing, right? Like they could just as easily be like Jerry and George from Seinfeld, right? Or like anybody on Cheers or from the Mary Tyler Moore Show or anything like that, right? And or even a try back is like Andy and Barney from Andy Griffith, right? Like they are just such a classic kind of comedy sitcom template, and having like that girlfriend that you have in those kind of dynamics with, right, I think plays into that so well. I think kind of the like 3 minute a baby aspect of having to like deal with Boo is like played to perfection. The like annoying boss who only likes one of you, but the boss hates the other one of you, is like a classic thing. The annoying coworker in Randall is Jim and Dwight, right? Like there's so many like things they're pulling from like classic TV shows or foreshadowing even in terms of like Jim and Dwight, that I think it does like it does a masterful job at making you relate to these characters and to this world. And even out of all the things this movie does well, I think in my top 3 is just like the walk to work scene, because I think it just establishes this world as like our world so well in a lot of ways. And just like, oh yeah, like we've all had these walks to work, like a little bit different, obviously, but like, yeah, this is my walk to work with my like best friend or my old roommate as we went somewhere, right? Like, I think it captures that same spirit and magic so well. And I think that is so much of what works about Monsters Inc. is that, and so much of like Pixar's magic is that they can take the most unrelatable seeming characters and make them so human and so relatable and so much like you, right? And they'd obviously continue to do this down the line with stuff like Wall-E, but I mean even Luca, they're monsters, I guess, technically too, right? Like, and I just think the craft that Pixar has in pulling out the humanity in any particular story they're telling and any particular characters they're interacting with, whether they're actually humans or toys or monsters or a robot, is a testament to how good of storytellers they are. Because I think Monsters Inc. is a fantastic workplace comedy sitcom essentially for an hour and a half. It's great.
Yeah. I still get in awe a little bit in just like the chase sequence at the end of like
on the doors,
the door conveyor belts and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just like, wow, like that's just like so much being put into that.
Yeah.
That like is just filler or just like extra color for this sequence.
Yeah.
Like it could be, half as many doors or something like that, and it would be like it would still be impressive, but the amount of things that they throw in there just gives you this like scope and sense of like how massive, how like obviously they theoretically have a door into every closet or every every home.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, like they're all gonna be back there somewhere in the factory.
Mm-hmm.
And I like it. I don't know what it will say about me, but I do not look forward to a day where like where I don't tear up when I hear Boo say kitty at the end.
Yeah.
Like that that still gets me
It
20
hits so
plus
hard.
years later, and is still like such a joy and delight. Just
Mhm.
the love between those two characters, the fast little
Right.
connection that they have is always wonderful. And yeah, that's like just one of those like, oh, that line gets me every time. Oh God.
Yeah.
Um, any favorite bits or anything else that you want to give some love to, give a shout out to?
Um, I think you already touched on her a lot, but I think Boo as a character is really great, right? And I think she perfectly captures the like manic, frantic energy of a child so well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is such a believable kid and how they would react to everything around them, right? And I think part of the magic of children is that yeah, they get dumped in this world of monsters and chaos, everything around them, and magic, portals to the Himalayas and endless doors, and they don't miss a beat. They're like, all right, cool, yeah, like let's go explore it. Let's go have fun here. Let's just do things here, right? And let's hang out with this giant kitty. And I always really loved that as a kid, right? Like I think there is a sense of childlike wonder about the world in Monsters Inc., right? Like it is such a colorful and vivid Pixar movie that I think, yeah, like Boo is a perfect counter to the classic 60s, 70s, 80s, TV buddy comedy, like sitcom that we're getting for most of the movie is, and then combine that with just the most colorful and, absurdist, like cartoon drawn from Boo here that constantly kind of levels it out and combines these two very different like comedic styles really, really well. Like I think when I think of Monsters Inc., really the only Pixar movie that kind of competes with it in terms of like the sense of like color and imagination and like wonderment to it would be like certain moments of Up or a lot of Coco, and the way they use color in that film as well to kind of bring that vibrancy to life. And I think Monsters Inc. does it really, really well. And I think, as you touched on, Boo and Sully's characters have such good chemistry together, right? Like almost like instantaneously, they just hit the ground running and you're off to it. And the fact that Boo and Sully aren't even the characters that have the best chemistry in this movie, because obviously Sully and Mike's chemistry is just like off the charts. And it makes total sense that they would be recording those lines right next to each other. I think it's a testament to how good John Goodman is in this movie, how good Billy Crystal is in this movie, and how good the actress that's playing Boo is doing this good movie, because all of them are delivering such great, very different performances that each kind of bring out the best of the other.
Yeah. Um, another just moment and beat that I want to give a shout out to, because I just love it every time it comes up as well, is Boo whacking Randall and his chameleon like camouflage just changing color, or like
Right.
pattern. Just a fun, always a fun sight gag, as are most of his. And then I'm always a sucker for the like the end where they trick him basically by going into the like training area that
Mm,
we were introduced to this world with. Like I love when a movie kind of sets something up like that and then like brings it back full circle and says, here's how we're going to use that again to like really cement in this moment of the plot. um just love that little bit as well. I think it's just such good plot work of the film overall. So yeah, that's I think that's everything I wanted to give some love to and shout out to. Like
mhm.
of course I think Randall's like comeuppance of being sent off into that trailer is also just a great like
Fantastic.
closing beat for
Right,
that
yeah.
character of like Gator got in the house again. Lovely little bit there. And yeah, just such a fun delight of a film. I almost
Mhm.
like, obviously they would go on years and years later to do Monsters University, but I almost would have loved to seen like what a sequel of this would look like with, what how Monstropolis is doing in the future with humor powering everything and comedy powering everything. What a like a sequel would have looked like versus the prequel that they end up eventually doing. Um,
Right.
because I just would have loved to seen like I wanted to see more of those characters, but not necessarily like let's go back to college of these characters. I don't dislike Monsters University, but it's not the additional story I would have necessarily been interested from them.
It's tough too, because I actually think Monsters Inc. has one of the like most perfect endings of any Pixar movie. Like, I like the fact that it ends right where it ends, right? And we just get that one moment of like her saying Kitty, and then him kind of like stepping forward, right? And then like that's it, and then that moment can be whatever you want it to be, right? Like your imagination can kind of fill out the rest, right? And I feel like no matter what a sequel to that would give me, it like, especially now, like 20 plus years later, like it wouldn't live up to like the ending I wrote for them in that moment, right? And so like I sort of like that if we had to have more Monsters Inc. stories, that we kind of went back in time. Obviously, we could have just not had any. But I sort of enjoy the fact that we kind of get this end in the way it is done, and we don't have to kind of think about what came next, right? Because like I think of stuff like, again, we've talked a lot, but like I think Toy Story 3 has like a perfect ending. Like it is just a perfect ending to that movie. And then we got Toy Story 4, and it doesn't diminish what we got in Toy Story 3 at all, but it is just kind of like all right, yeah, like I didn't really need this, right? Like this didn't like add a whole lot more for me here. And so like if we had to, I guess I would have rather had us go do Toy Story 4 as like a prequel, right? Or just like a standalone story, like in that Toy Story universe, right? And so yeah, I like what we had as the end of Monsters Inc. and just kind of it can be left there.
I just thinking about this, I was just reminded of an animated short came out a couple years ago, featuring Alana Pierce and another friend, Andy Cortez, as well as a few others. It was an animated short called "The Monster Under My Bed," and it's basically about a girl who makes friends with the monster under her bed, and like the monster under the bed comes in and she basically like befriends it. She could go under her bed into like the monster's world, and she is the monster under the bed too, or she's like the human under the bed to the monster kind of thing. And it's just like a 7 little minute short or something like that, I think. But it starts out with like your main character played by Alana as a child, and then like we flash forward to her in her college years or something, and she has stayed friends with that monster over the years. And it's what that relationship looks like, and then like it kind of ends with like both her and the monster grown, having a family of their own, and like their kids becoming friends, like monster under the bed friends kind of thing.
I really like that.
And so like it almost, I would be curious, especially like for now, if they did like a one of these legacy sequel kind of things, if they did something 20 years later of like this girl who was Boo and grew up is still friends with Sully, or still like has this connection to the monster world, and like what that like, but like nobody believes her or something like that, or what that would look like, or she runs away from home into the monster world, and what would a modern kind of twist on that relationship look like that is so it is like far enough removed that that's still that like end moment with Boo can still live there and sit there for many years, but what would it look like 15, 20 years later,
2 decades
if they've stayed friends and stayed connected, and now or now like the human world needs monsters to come help or something like that. What, like, I think there's potential out there for other stories, and keeping those relationships going, that I think could have been like, or could be fun and interesting, that aren't, hey, let's go and do Animal House but with monsters. And bring back a much older sounding John Goodman and Billy Crystal to play much younger versions of themselves. But yeah. Anyway, any last thoughts before we rank, or before we review, give the report card grades on this one, Logan?
I mean, I think Monsters Inc. is great, right? I mean, I guess it's more of like a report card section, but like, I mean, I just think I think it's fantastic. I mean, it's an easy A for me, right?
Okay.
I was just kind of like looking back as I have the past couple weeks at my list, like I think Monsters Inc. probably just misses out on my top 5 favorite Pixar movies. That is more a testament to the quality of filmmaking that Pixar does than anything in the negative to Monsters Inc. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a ton of fun. Like I said, it'd be one of the 2 or 3 that I could like rewatch just like repeatedly in a short time period, right? Consistently. Like it's always a blast. It's always fun. And I think Billy Crystal, John Goodman, Steve Buscemi, Jennifer Tilly, like all put in such great performances here that there's hardly a downbeat. And again, we didn't even talk about like I really like the Abominable Snowman. Like I think it is one of John Ratzenberger's best like Pixar cameo performances, and he's very funny in like the little beat he gets, and he's there like just long enough to like be great. And I love that is what I love that is that character's backstory. I love that is kind of what he has become. Like it's just fun all across the board. And I think the movie, you can't help but just smile throughout like the entire thing. Like it is just a joy.
Yeah. I agree. Easy A for me as well.
Yeah.
Just such a delight. And yeah, I mean up there, especially in that like that early era, just like this is one of those that set like that basically cemented
really. Yeah.
Pixar is going to be really good at this moving forward.
Yeah.
And yeah, like they're going to get, they might not always win, but they're going to get nominated for pretty much everything they put out for many, many years to come. So shout out to Monsters Inc. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. There are a lot of Monsters spin-off things. There's, of course, the big one, Monsters University, but there are also a whole bunch of shorts, including Monsters at Work, Mike's New Car, which I mentioned earlier, and Party Central, which is another Monsters Inc. spin-off, like a little few-minute thing. Then you get into some of the other kind of Pixar things of this era with Finding Nemo, Toy Story, Cars, and Inside Out. And then I'm throwing it in there just as I have in episodes past. For the Birds was the one that kind of came out alongside this. That's the fun one with like lots of small little birds on a telephone wire, and then this giant bird comes in and they all start making fun of him, and comedy ensues. The thing's only like 3 minutes long or whatever, but it's just like wonderful little, comedy. And that bird is very much like almost setting a template for Kevin from Up that we would get many, many years later. So shout out to For the Birds.
That's fair.
Extracurriculars. Have you watched anything else on Disney Plus recently there, Logan?
No. Again, I'm mostly just gonna binge the shorts. I think I said that last week. That's what I'll do, is just watch a lot of these shorts.
I, in addition to watching Moon Knight, which I've been continuing to do, and we'll talk more about next week, this most recent episode was easily my favorite of the series. And while the series overall is not my favorite Marvel Disney Plus series, Oscar Isaac's performance over the course of the series might be one of my favorite Marvel performances. He's just really good because he's Oscar Isaac. So shout out to that. I also, in kind of anticipation for potential Star Wars thing in a couple weeks, I started rewatching Rebels, just to revisit that series. And that might be it for me. Oh, like I'm tempted to, and I'm gonna probably sit down at some point soon and watch Ratatouille, but I've not pulled the trigger on that one yet. Anyway, but yeah, that is gonna do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Logan, for joining me to talk about Monsters Inc., as well as Bug's Life and Luca for the last couple weeks of this Pixar-esque month. You can follow Logan at Lefty Loggy or Lefty Logie, Logggy on Twitter. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Logan?
I'm going to give a shout out to what show is this? D Plus Show. I'm going to give a shout out to That Nudie Site Show. As well as, of course, Let's Plays going live Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday over on YouTube. Tuesday and Thursdays by Trevor. And on Friday, we have Friday Night Dying Light with Cameron doing Dying Light 2. Go check all of those out. They're always fun to go watch.
Cool. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. In addition to those, I will give a shout out to our other 2 podcasts, That News You Care About, where you can find me and Logan talking about video game news or something video game related for the week, as well as That Bond Show, our YouTube only podcast over on youtube.com/thatnerdysite, where each and every Saturday you can find Logan and I sitting down talking about Bond movies from Dr. No to No Time to Die. We are behind the curtain, like recording wise, we have wrapped up the Pierce Brosnan era. Episode release wise, we're in the middle of them right now, I think.
Right, yeah.
I think Tomorrow Never Dies is probably the next one up.
It is going to go live on Saturday.
Yeah.
As you listen to this.
So we are about to in our timeline, we're about to dive into the Daniel Craig era of things.
Huge shift.
So that is nearing an end, since that's going to be a limited run series, of course, but go check that out every Saturday over on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. Diehard Bond fan Logan and noob / I've seen the modern ones, me. You can go catch our thoughts on all of those Bond movies, as well as Logan's companion write-ups for each and every movie that he does as a review. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. As always, thank you for joining us. Stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.